All right, so just shortly before this, I had a question on why is a process book important, and why is it being emphasized more now than it was in the past. And you know, coming from other professors, it's becoming more and more important because they see how the job market, you know, and a job market sees how you develop your ideas. And so the process book is essentially your map on how you created exactly, you know, your toy to every little detail, and that's what you want to show in your process book. It's sort of like a web map, but of everything that you've built, and it also proves to you that, or proves to them that you built it yourself and you didn't grab it from other sources and stuff like that. And employers apparently they love it. So and that's why we started to emphasize it more. And Boyer, and when you guys are taking 280, you guys are going to be a lot more prepared going into that class if you have a good understanding of what to put in your process book and what to have ready. So let's get started. So first I'm going to talk about is a couple of other process books. I grabbed some good ones that are A's, you know. So I have a physical copy here, which is from Mike Delmonico, and I'll leave this up and you guys can take a look at it. But it's an amazing toy and process book, and we'll go over this one, but not on this. All right, so the first thing I want to show you is a not very good process book, which is mine. All right, so here's mine. Now, this is just a cover, but in our process book, we had, you know, very limited assets we had to have inside it. So, as you guys know, you need to have your competitors, right? Your mechanisms and gears, your material part and part list, and then your ideation and color studies, and then your actual images of your product at the end. So this would be like kind of bare minimum of what you guys would need to do. So you show your target demographic, your competitive market, and you guys have already been looking at that stuff, right? So make sure that you guys are always documenting, taking pictures of what you're doing, your inspiration, as well as you know, what your toys competitors are. And then that'll help you differentiate your toy from the others. Mechanisms and gears. So this brings me to one of the topics that Boyer wanted me to emphasize when I was giving this presentation is image quality. So this is just using SOLIDWORKS exploded view and then creating it in a drawing, which you guys know how to do that. I can show you guys how to do that if you don't know already. When you save as a PDF, it saves as the background as a transparency, and it saves all the lines as vector. And so it'll always be extremely high resolution. And so one of the biggest rookie mistakes for creating a process book is when you get it printed, or that the resolution is really bad, and you see blurry pictures and images. And so to avoid that, you almost always want to save as a PDF or a TIFF file, and then save the transparency so that you can put it on backgrounds and it doesn't, you know, isn't distracting with you know, a gray background or the background that's given to you in SOLIDWORKS. Or you have to do a bunch of Photoshop work after, which if you want to save time. You guys know how to use keyshot. This is a super simple keyshot image, but this is how I structured my parts list. And then you guys have your actual parts chart, which you guys should already know how to do from the last project you guys did. So it's basically the same setup, but you can see how poorly the image resolution is actually. Zoom in. So that's a rookie mistake. See, this is my first process book, and you guys don't want to make the same mistake, but it's actually not too bad. Are you having them do the assembly as well? Okay. So I've already forgotten how to do this, but I think I did it right this time. But we'll talk about that later when I can repeat that. And then the last parts are your drawings. So hopefully you guys didn't just go straight into your SolidWorks file and just started creating something you know haven't touched on ideating on paper. So all of your drawings that you've done, you need to save because you're going to be reusing them. And if you want to make them look really nice, you don't just take a picture of a piece of paper and then post it on there. And then these are the fun images that you'll get to do when the toy is actually done. And then yeah, so that is that's an okay process book. This is Paul's process book, just a little bit more fleshed out. And one thing between the two of my process book and his, and you want to do for yours, is sort of design it to match the theme of your toy. So mine was kind of futuristic, so I wanted to have a sci-fi-esque design with my process book, and you guys are going to want to have a process book that supports the theme and design of your toy. And so Paul, he did a fantasy toy, and so his process book was laid out like this, very sticking to a very clear, defined theme. And then his table of contents, he has his target audience, market competition, and then his mechanisms, and everything that I had to do. So this is the same class. So you can see he set up his market competition here, and his motions and mechanisms. Now that's using the SolidWorks file, and then bringing it into other programs to edit it. To be that clean line visuals. Here's his parts list, and then his view of the mechanisms, explaining how his mechanisms are used. His ideation. So these are all hand drawings that he did, but you can see it's much more clearly defined. Resolution is nice, and you couldn't tell that this was done on paper before it was brought down to this, right? All right, and then another exploded view, and then his different color studies. And then his end. And then the last one is actually for a 280 project that Paul did. And this one is more heavily themed, but it's also fancy, and it's having sort of an 8-bit design. And yeah, this is kind of like going to that next level. If you guys are doing something that is themed, to kind of put your heart and soul into creating something that's better than you can expect. What you should take away from this project is the attention to detail and storytelling with the use of images, and not a lot of writing. So he has very little writing, but everything is shown in images using lines, arrows to help demonstrate. Like you can see that it's flexing here, but this is its rigid property. So this is the best way to show someone your ideas quickly is to show with images. No one wants to read a giant block of text. And that's it. So starting with the new document. We don't really use the book in library. The document is great for creating books anyway. So to start off with the number of pages, you can edit that once you get into once you start a new file. But we'll just say for right now we're going to do 12 pages. When you go to print, it's really important that if you're doing like a saddle stitch, which is like the cheapest way to get printed, which I assume everyone, they don't have to print?
No, they don't. They will be printing for the portfolio.
Okay, so expect that this book that you're going to make will be printed for your portfolio. So get the work done now, and you can actually have it printed when you turn in your toy. But you at least want it for your portfolio. So you need to make sure everything is high resolution so that when you do the actual print, that everything looks super fancy. When you do a saddle stitch, the page, unless you want blank pages at the end of your book the number of pages need to be in multiples of 4. Because if you think about it, it's an 11 by 17, right? And then it's 8.5 by 11, and it's 2 of those, and so there's a forward back on both, so it creates 4 pages, right? And when you layer a bunch of them on top and then fold them, and then they just staple the back. And so if you don't want to have blank looking pages at the back of your book, which looks really not good, then you want to make sure that you're building your books in multiples of 4. So another thing that we like to do is, you guys know the rule of thirds, right? Well, the rule of thirds basically, things look nice in groups of 3 or in divisions of 3. So they have columns here, which is it's essentially like ruling lines that will help you organize your work, your text and your images. You don't have to use the rules, or the rulers, but it helps to help organize, and the program will automatically snap to those rules. So we're going to go ahead and just put 3. You can use 2 as well. Make it still look really nice. And then the orientation of the book. So we're going to do it as a standard 8.5 by 11. But when it's folded, it's going to be 8.5 by 11. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is the pages on the right here. So you have your first page, and you'll see this tiny little A at the upper right corner, and that corresponds to your master pages. And so these are your 2 master pages here. So this is your left page and your right page as you would look at it if you were opening your book. Any action that you change on any of the master pages will affect all of the pages that are linked under that master. So you see all of these have the letter A under them. So anytime I make a change to this master page, it's going to be affected on all the pages that have A in it. So you can see all of the pages here now have this green box inside them. So this is a good way to set up sort of your general format. And you can create other masters in here. So you can create a master B. And then whenever I want to drag the page, I can drag it like this. And now we have master B over here. And so I want all my master Bs to have a blue triangle in it instead. Or purple. So super useful for creating backgrounds and things that you don't want to have to constantly change. And then any unique pages that you don't want to have the same format, you can just use the none page and you can just drag it over. And then this one won't be bound by the rules of the master pages. So these are probably your most powerful tools to use to help you organize. And then these are the rulers that I was talking about, the columns. So it splits things into corners, or into segments. And then you'll notice it also has this bar here at the top. Basically, you don't want any print or anything that you plan on being printed going past these lines, because inside here, between these 2, it's usually fine because the pages are going to be printed by 8.5 or by 11 by 17. So there can actually, the actual physical printers can print inside here, but on the edges and stuff, it doesn't work very well. So even your page numbers or anything that goes on the corners, you want to make sure they're inside these ruling lines. Okay. Let's talk about creating boxes. So in InDesign, it's slightly different from Photoshop and from Illustrator, where you have like a place and linked and place embedded. When you create a box, this is sort of the frame that you're making, and whenever you put an image inside it, it's not exactly bound to this frame. So if I wanted to put an image inside, let's see. So all I did was do file, place, and it created, so my image here is a lot larger than the box that I made. And so when I double click on this image, you'll see that this box showed up, and this is the size of the image that I brought in. So you can see inside here, this is the tiny frame, that's the boundary. If I hold shift and I drag from the center, it's going to keep the same ratio. And I can drag it. And so now we have our image on the inside. And you can see you can move the image around and it keeps the frame centered. And you can do the same thing with text. So I can delete this. And then I can add text in here. So everything is that you make in InDesign is going to be made with these boxes. And then you can edit the boxes as well, so that they have different properties or different sizes, so they're not just a box. If you hold on the pen tool, there's, that's kind of coming off the side. You can see add anchor point, delete anchor point. So I can add anchor points onto this box, then I can manipulate it. So I can create different, now if I go back, place, and you can see there's the image inside there. So when you're structuring your process books, everything is going to be using these bounding boxes. And then you can create interesting displays and organizations that way. What else should I show? You guys know how to import text? So like, you know Helvetica? Everyone knows Helvetica, right? Helvetica is like the super standard font size or font flavor, but the for whatever reason, like a lot of default fonts don't include Helvetica, but you can find Helvetica for free online. People know how to install Helvetica, fonts. Everyone knows how to do that now, right? Okay, that's a really basic thing you guys will learn how to use. So if you ever need to, a cool way to make your process book look really cool is to use custom fonts that fit the theme of your toy or of your process book. So you want to make sure that you think about everything, including the different kinds of fonts. A general rule of thumb is any kind of text that you're going to use, it'll look small on the digital file, but when you print it, it'll be really big if you use anything but 12-point font. So 12-point font is pretty much you're guaranteed what you want to use for general blocks of text. Anything that's like titles and stuff like that, you can mess around with, and that can be generally up to you. Just make sure that when you have a lot of font, like you do have a text box that you want people to actually read, that it is not some obnoxious font that's really big or really small or anything like that. So even if you do have a very stylized and themed font for maybe your titles and stuff, you definitely don't want to make that mistake and use that as your general text, because it's going to look really awkward and it's not going to read well when you have a 12-point font. So if you don't know what like a super simple font is, to use for general blocks of text, just use Helvetica because it's the easiest to just go to that always looks nice. What else? So there's other tools like gradients and stuff that works generally like Illustrator does. That's pretty much what you guys need to know in terms of creating it. Are there any questions to start from here? Okay. I guess we can.
Is it better to have it portrait or landscape?
It really is up to you, but the default is to have portrait. But if you want to do, an extra fancy looking, or you want to stand out, then yeah, you can do sort of a custom paper size. All right, and then I kind of want to just talk about, generally the, I guess the meta of process books. So it's really important that you express all of your ideas in your process book. And so we have, and Matthias on his rubric for the process book, will have very clear and defined guidelines for what you need to have inside your process book. But also you need to sort of create this ideology that, what you're creating is tied to you and how your brain works. And you probably won't get it on this first process book, but as you start to, when you jump into 280 and you're doing process books like every 2 weeks, then you'll start to learn like how to create one that is like your own flavor. So what else? Yeah, so where you guys are at right now, make sure that you guys are taking plenty of pictures and document everything that you do. And it sounds like, oh, that's easy, but it's actually really hard to take a moment and when you come up with the epiphany for how your project is going to work, to take a second and write that down. Because you'll want, when you start creating your process book, if you don't have any assets, you're going to have a super thin and flimsy process book that doesn't actually demonstrate what you want your toy to demonstrate. So it's really important that you're consistently documenting everything that you want to use. So pictures is the best. Just take tons and tons and tons of pictures. And then when you get to the point to when you're actually starting to implement those pictures, that's where you kind of need to go into Photoshop and stuff and clean the lines up and making sure that everything looks super sharp. Yeah.
I do recommend, like, for any of our, like, let's say we did like really sketchy drawings for our ideation and stuff like that. Should we keep that, or should we redo it so it looks a little bit neater?
It depends. If you have a really sketchy style that looks nice, I mean, there's some people who have a sketchy style that just looks really good, then I would highly recommend you use it. Especially because, and I'm starting to learn this more as I do process books, is having those ideation drawings look amazing as kind of like background filling space. Like whenever you have like this awkward space in between like your pictures and your text or something like that, having some ideation drawings in there just as like kind of fill in that white space ends up just looking like way more nice and professional. So yeah, don't have to clean them up, but anything like CAD drawings absolutely has to be clean. Anything that's supposed to show engineering, anything like that, everything needs to be super clean. Yeah.
Would you recommend adding like iterations of like failed designs? Or
Yes,
designs like
definitely.
Okay.
Especially failed things. If you did something and it didn't work, that's like an extremely, like if especially if you had something that you failed and didn't work and then you learned from that and then you moved on, that's more something that you'll do more so in 280. And you want to emphasize in 280, but in the process book, if you have something like that and you want to add it in, really important. Like for instance, one thing that I should have added in my process book, which I still want to go back and do, is I made custom bevel gears that I had to learn how to make, and I looked all online to find how to make them, and there's literally nothing. And so I genuinely created a bevel gear unlike anyone that's ever been made. And you know, that I want to emphasize in my process book, but I didn't do that. So anything that's unique to what you've done, you absolutely want to have that be you know, a page to multiple pages inside your book. It shows that next level of thinking and effort. Other questions? Yeah. Sorry, Wes first.
Would you recommend that we draw digitally if we can, or just like scan our drawings? Like which one?
Every way. If you have hand drawings, scan them. If you have digital drawings, then it's much easier just to put them, drop them in, you know, straight away. The biggest thing though is if you're creating a digital drawing or if you're scanning, you need to make sure the resolution is extremely high. Nothing less than 600 dpi, I would say, because and same with renderings. You want to always, it's better to always have way higher resolution than you need it than to have a really crappy resolution and then have to go back and then redo it. So I make all my renders in like 4K resolution, and all of my pictures I make sure are close to like, you know, 2K or something like that in pixels. And it'll, you know, someone looking at it will never go, hey, that picture's out of resolution, or, you know, out of focus or something like that, even though it was just crappy resolution that you just imported it from. So, yeah, make sure that all the pictures and everything super high resolution and clean. And that's why it ends up looking like a pontoon boat instead of a race boat or something like that. Those are all little aspects you might not think about. Your brain just, you know, does it immediately, but you're going to want to try to like, and as designers, you're going to want to try to get into that, you know, motion of like when you have those epiphanies or you have those, you know, changes in your ideas, document those.
Nothing. So I know, like, I talked to multiple students before that if your plan A didn't work, like you had a certain type of design for a toy, and now you're completely changing what you're totally going for your toy is now. Should you document that in your process? Saying like, I originally was going to do this, but then this didn't work out, and now I'm doing this instead. Or
that I feel like is, if you're doing a process book for the entire class, then yes. But if you're doing a process book for your toy, and the, you know, plan A was a spaceship and plan B is a, you know, something totally different, like a ballerina, then I would say it happened. There was a point that was not. Yeah, but I mean that happens, you know. And I wouldn't. I don't think that is something. But if it was something, you know, like, hey, I wanted to have an all-terrain vehicle, and oh no, you know, all-terrain doesn't make any sense. I'm gonna have it just, you know, walk on walls or something like that instead. Then you can document why you decided to make those changes. And specifics, you know, be really detailed. But the best way is to show with images. And a lot of us, if you're taking Rapid Viz, that's supposed to be the class that shows you how to communicate visually using images instead of just words. And if you're not having that experience, then you need to talk to your professor. Because that's an extremely powerful skill to know, and you'll need to perfect that in the future. So using arrows, demonstrating things, and the internet is an amazing source to look for those things too. You can find examples of other process books that professionals have done, which I actually don't have. It's not exactly a process book. They do have an example of a professional game company that they make process books. Not exactly a process book, but you can sort of see the fidelity and the fact that in the professional world, if you're a designer, you're still going to be creating process books, even when you're super old. All right, so this is from a video game where they build spaceships, and every spaceship has a brochure that goes with it. And so you can see how the format here shows, you know, super high quality renderings. This is actually the back. So this would be like next level visuals, right? So here's the cover. And, you know, mostly pictures. This is a good way to sort of format your book. Not very much writing, but, you know, each image has a purpose. You don't want to just be placing images that don't have significance. And then, of course, CAD drawings are always super pretty. And you can see that, they didn't use any colors on this because they wanted to emphasize, design and shape. Color studies. This is a really cool way to do a color study where you actually have the color study, then you put the palette underneath it. So this just goes to show you that, in the professional world, you'll be doing process books to show your company as well. So not just to show your employers or possible employers on interviews. But from what I've heard from other professors, that sometimes getting a job was entirely up to the process book that they had made and showed them. So it's a great way to show people how you think, and if you're good at thinking, then you'll make a great process book. Anything else I should add?
For the future, like once we want to print it and put it together, should we put it like on the spiral things or like the other clips?
So I highly recommend you go to ARC Document Solutions. Now Julie will give you that reference. I assume everyone's in 255. If not, write that down. ARC Document Solutions, and they're in Irvine or Costa Mesa, something like that. And they do professional prints for like architects and stuff. You can get any kind of binding that you want there. So they do the spiral binding, but the simplest and cheapest is to do the saddle stitch, which I told you was just nice quality 11 by 17 paper with your pages printed on them, and then they just stack a whole bunch of them, fold them in half, and then staple the binding. And that's what the saddle stitch is. They literally put it on like a saddle, put all the pages on a saddle, and then they have a puncher that punches the staples in.
And then the spacing for like from the border to where everything begins, how much is that?
Well, in InDesign it'll show you. So this is the spacing, but I think that's generally 1/4 of an inch. I believe is what it is.
Is that a default?
Yeah, I believe that's the default. Yeah, and it's just because of how printers work, right? Because printers have wheels on them that roll the paper through, and the wheels actually some of them take up the space that the printer can actually print on. And so the area on the inside of the box is where the printer's printing needle can actually touch. So try not to have text that goes or anything that goes on the outside, because it might not print that.
So they need to present digital for the finals.
Okay.
So any changes or
Yeah. So
PDFs or
when you're creating your file, so let's say I want to save as or export. So the big difference is whether you want to print on pages or spreads. So the images that I showed you for our book, for my book, was on pages, so you're seeing one page at a time. If you save as a spread, then you're seeing the 11 by 17 version without the binding in the middle, right? So when you're showing for a presentation for Matthias, you're going to want to save as a spread so that everyone can see, because you might have an image that spreads across both pages, or a design that spreads across both pages, through the binding, the center binding. In which case you'll want to have the spread. That way you're not switching back between one page. So that's basically the only other difference. When you, if you're printing at FedEx, I know that they like it to be saved in pages, but in ARC Document Solutions, I guess they use spreads instead to print theirs. So yeah. You guys kind of have an understanding. So right now you guys are kind of in this place where either you've sent your prints your 3D prints to get printed, and you're kind of like milling around or hoping that everything goes well and it returns to you. This would be a good time to start working on your process books. And I know a lot of you don't have all the assets and pictures that you will want, so try not to wait too much longer to catch up on that work, because you don't want to forget about it.
Also remember that grade for the process book is a good percentage now. The reason I changed and make a project is because I wanted to avoid the lightweight type of process books, where you used to have 5 pages or sometimes even 4, because then leave it for last minute. The main emphasis should be on the development of the project, or the toy itself, from research to ideation to engineering, design, and eventually manufacturing processes. But it's okay to, in some of those portions, to show everything that you do, or markups and things like that as well. Okay. So I think in a minimum of 16 to 20 pages should be this type of thing.
So if we're doing multiples of 4, that's what? 16 or
16 to 20.
20. Yeah.
That's minimum, okay? So make sure that you convey the ideas well, and like Eric mentioned, when we review portfolios, we want to get how you think more than a set of skills. How you solve the problems, how you create something and take it throughout the process and end up with something that can be manufactured. That is the main idea. Okay, so it will be the same as digital, giving you the opportunity to refine even more before portfolio. Okay? Thanks, Eric.
Yeah. Hope that helps. Please ask me if you have more questions about that kind of stuff, or if you'd like to see more examples. You have examples from others.
Yeah, I have some.
Yeah.
It's
See,
all over the place. So now I wanted to unify and make it more, even along the line, so everybody has more or less the same, for future portfolio reviews. Okay. Put more emphasis in manufacturing and materials than explaining how you create the model. Okay. The model will. You can talk a little bit about some of the changes that you've done or how you prove through a markup or something, but mainly materials and manufacturing processes. That's the core of the class. So that is very important. All right? I'll be sending, I forgot my hard drive, but I have a guideline where I put everything in there, all what is required for this process book. So you will be receiving either email or I posted on the Facebook page. Thank you.
yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.